Hi Team Powerhouse, I'm here at Keller Williams Suburban Tampa, and I'm interviewing today Jasmine, who is from Hillsborough Title. She is a title extraordinaire, and she's going to share with us today some information that you may not know about title companies. Now, for me personally, when I purchased my home, nobody explained to me anything about title companies, and the only reason why I knew anything about it was just reading the pre-closing documents before I went to the table. I still didn't have quite an idea of how important a title company is to the process. And like many of you may have experienced, title companies just take money from you, right? And they might look for some mistakes on the title. Well, I'm here with Jasmine today, and she's going to go into the depths of what a title company is, what it does, and what it means for you, particularly as a buyer in the home buying process. So welcome to the channel, Jasmine.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. So for someone who has never purchased a home, can you explain exactly what a title company is in plain English?
Of course. So a title company is essentially a company who's going to handle all of the work that it takes to ensure clear title. So we're going to hold things like escrow. We're going to be the ones receiving the documents from the buyer's lender in order to ensure that everything is ready for the closing process. We also get the chance to sit down with both seller and buyer to sign all their finalized closing documents and to create the very last final touch of sending money, receiving money so that the buyer gets their keys.
Okay, and what documents does the seller have to give you?
Yeah, so the seller is going to go ahead and just give us all the upfront information. So if they have a prior survey, anything about the property, things about themselves, like their personal information, we're going to need their social, their address for where they're going to be living after the home is sold, and basically anything that's like privy to the transaction.
Okay, and so you mentioned earnest money deposit. What exactly is an earnest money deposit?
Yeah, so earnest money is essentially like a good faith deposit. So it's essentially the buyer saying, I'm interested in this property, I want the property, and I'm going to put the funds up to show you that if anything happens and I decide to take a step back, you get to keep the money because, I made the decision to go ahead and purchase the home, and maybe I'm not so interested, but it's just a good faith deposit showing that you're going to go through with the property and you didn't waste anybody's time.
Okay. And so how is the buyer's earnest money deposit kept safe when it's sent to the title company?
Right, so every single title company is different, but essentially for, I want to say all, they do a really good job at making sure that everything is secure to the bank, to what we use to receive money, whether it be wire, through electronic deposit, just making sure that we have all of the different places, things in store to make sure that we're not, not misusing, but just not being safe with what is so important in the beginning of the transaction. So we have a bunch of different regulations and things like that set up, and it's kept in a really safe, secure portal.
Okay, and how much of a transaction total sales price is like the earnest deposit? Is there like a hard and fast rule for how much one should put down on a home, or is it just up to the buyer?
Yeah, I think it comes down to negotiations, because a lot of buyers can't put up that kind of money. Typically, it's a certain percentage of the purchase price. Typically, it's 10% of the purchase price they'll go ahead and make a deposit for. It comes down to what your agent is willing to negotiate with the seller, and then even some of the programs that they have, like with lenders and companies like that give, escrow deposit, paybacks and stuff like that. So you don't have to consume that cost all at once.
Okay. And so, people say, well, what are the conditions for me not to get my money back? And what are the conditions for me to get my money back? Is that something that the realtor works out with the seller, or how does that work?
Right, so it all comes down to what you negotiated right at the beginning. A lot of times they put that in the contract. They'll say, we'll give you up to this date. If you back out between this period, we will give you your money back. But a day after, the money will stay with the seller. Typically, that is something that you agree with in the beginning. That's just so that all the parties are known. I will say personally, I think that a lot of times agents, buyers, and sellers don't have those really tough conversations. If something were to happen, what should happen? So a majority of the time, if a sale does get canceled, the buyer and the seller end up in a really big dispute trying to figure out, well, no, this money's mine, I'm not going to give you that kind of money, I need it to buy my next house, and blah, blah, blah. So I think it comes down to just being really transparent in the beginning and setting those kind of guidelines.
So is the title company involved at all if there's a dispute?
They are not. We kind of clean our hands. We hold the money. We can never disperse any of that money. We can't get a call from a buyer saying, oh, well, I want to keep it, so please send it back to me. We'll need it written down, signed by both the seller and the buyer, stating who the money is going to. If they cannot come to a a conclusion on who will get the money, typically the money just sits in escrow, unless one of the parties gets a lawyer and then kind of fights it that way. But the title company, we kind of we take a step back and we're like, whenever you're ready to figure out how you're going to do it, then we'll go ahead and disperse.
Okay, so it's more of a legal process at that point.
Mm-hmm,
okay, you're just more of a custodian.
Exactly.
Okay, but why does a buyer need title insurance if, let's say, the initial title search comes clean?
Right. Typically, what we like to do, or this is what I like to say, we can run, preliminary title searches and things like that, but everyone in this world is human, right? When it comes down to people recording in the county and the people who are behind all the things like that, like they're human and they make mistakes. So a title search, even though it seems like it could be clear initially, we really dive deep into, all the things that could have been recorded. We research the deeds and see if it has a clear chain of title, if everything was executed correctly. So even if something does look clean, you never know what could come up again or from the past that maybe wasn't recorded in the county for people to, make the assumption that everything was clean.
Okay, so this happened to somebody I know very recently, was that he paid off a piece of land in another state. So he thought he was good to go. But then when he decided to sell his home, this apparently land completion of that payment was never recorded. Do you run into that when you go deeper?
Yes. I like to tell everyone it's kind of like you become like an investigator when you become like a processor or a closer in this business, because it's your job to understand, if you read a certain document in the county, it's not just for you to be like, okay, well, yeah, that looks good. It's for you to understand the document and what it's really stating. Like if I paid off this piece of land, like in your example, I would like to know what else was going on during that time. Was that person legally allowed to sell the land? And did I do all my due diligence? So our company, we really hone in making sure that we're understanding the document. And just because it's in the county doesn't mean like, oh, we're good. We have to go ahead and do more research to make sure that everything was done correctly. So just making sure that you have a title company that does their due diligence and really works on making sure that everything is clear is probably the best part about choosing title and making sure who you work with.
Okay, so let's say there is a cloud on the title. Do you just let them know there's a cloud on the title? Do you help them resolve it? Do you give them steps? Like what's your role in that type of situation?
Right. It's essentially just getting it to the finish line, making sure that it does get cleared up. We will never ever in the history of Ecker close anything without knowing that this is completely free and clear. One of the things that we do, which doesn't have to do much with your example, but something that I love is that sellers, when they sell their home and we have the initial payment to pay off their mortgage so that, it goes through the county stating that they have satisfied the mortgage, our company, even after closing, is still following up with the mortgage lender to make sure that you're getting the letter of satisfaction. So they're not just like, okay, well, congratulations, you're done. Even way after the thing, the process has closed, they're still making sure that everything is being recorded and you're getting all your documents. And they really care to make sure that everything was clearly paid off, that we have some kind of receipt showing or some kind of information stating, yes, we got your payment, you're good to go. So I think that's also really important, not just kind of washing your hands of a deal and saying, okay, well, let's move on to the next one, but making sure you follow through even after things are closed.
Very good. So what are some of the weirdest ghosts that you've found in a property's past during a title search?
Yeah, so this one isn't specifically to our company, but it was one that I knew about that has always really stood out to me. It essentially was a woman, she was selling her home, or she was in the process of putting her grandkids into title because she was getting to that age where she was getting ready to pass away. Unfortunately, she passed away before she could actually execute the deed and transfer title to her grandkids. She didn't have a trust. It was just kind of like that thing that we don't really worry about until the time comes. But the grandkids, they really wanted the property and they did not want to go through probate. And so they went ahead and forged her signature on a fake deed that they found and they recorded it in the county. So when we got the file, we were doing all the things, looking at it and everything, and we saw her death certificate, the woman's death certificate recorded, and it was like 6 months after they had recorded the new deed. So, we were like, what do you mean you're selling this property? Like, you're not even the legal owners and your grandmother was dead when you forged this deed. And they were like, well, we'll just make it go through probate now. So something like that people probably wouldn't even have looked into. Like if a buyer had bought that property, they were illegally selling that property because it didn't really belong to them. So kind of, yeah, that was probably the biggest story and the biggest ghost that I saw. And I was like, wow, I can't believe people are doing this.
Yeah. So a buyer and seller sees closing costs, somewhere estimated between 3% and 6%. Where does all that money go?
Yeah, so it goes into paying for all of the transactions. So things that your lender needs, it pays the title search fees, the settlement fees, your recording fees, it's kind of dispersed into different sections of the whole process. Your final disclosure statement, or your ALTA will kind of break down where all your money went. That way you can make sure that it actually went towards something that was privy to the transaction and not just, like, oh, thanks, we'll pocket all this money and it's not going towards anything that's really beneficial to you.
So we learned in our training that, buyers receive that settlement statement. It's somewhere 24 hours in advance, if not a little bit longer. And that this sheet shows the debits and credits between the buyer and the seller. And this way, there's no surprises at the closing table.
Exactly.
Right? And so sometimes a buyer might see some fees that looks like it's imposed by the title company, when in reality, it's not the title company making the profit on those fees. It may actually be the county or the city in which they live. Can you explain a little bit maybe of which is a county fee or a city fee that's on that?
Yeah, of course. So things like the title insurance premium, those are things that are regulated by the county. So that's not something that even if they went to a different title company, they'd see a difference in, because it has to do with the percentage of how much they take out per the purchase price. Other things like the recording fees for their deed, for their mortgage, and anything else that needed to be recorded is also state regulated. It isn't something that the title company gets to choose. So things like those kind of fees are things that we cannot change, but things that are different within every single title company would be things like the closing fee. So how much we as a company charge a buyer or a seller to close the home, because the title company needs to keep going, right?
Sure.
So your payment in that would be something that would change or differentiate wherever it is that you are. But things like that have to do with the home and the sale, unfortunately, they're not things that we can change or make cheaper, which would be nice, right?
Yeah, sure. So walk us through a typical closing day. Who's in the room and who's doing exactly what? Because I know when I showed up to closing day, all I saw was a bunch of stacks of papers and people running in and out of the room doing who knows what, trying to get things last minute done. So can you walk us through that process?
Yeah, of course. So you will go ahead, of course, you'll be scheduled, you walk into the room. Typically, if you would like for your real estate agent to be there, we definitely encourage that. Typically, sometimes they come by themselves. You're more than welcome to bring family and friends. We really love it when you guys are all celebrating together. But you will be in the room with a closer, preferably the person that you have gotten to know during the transaction. So for the first half of the transaction, when it's going through clearing title and the lender's fees, you work with a processor, and that will be one person. When it gets closer to closing, you'll start dealing with a closer. This is the person who's going to put all the fees and make sure we're all balanced with the lender. So they have more in-depth information on what the fees look like. They can explain to you taxes. They're all insured through the state. We have to get our title insurance license and stuff like that. They're also notaries. So you'll sit with a closer. You'll have your agent, and it's just this, essentially just, like you said, a big stack of paper and going through and signing your life away. Yeah. So that's typically what happens. And then whenever that closer leaves, it's typically for them to go back to their computer, send all the documents to your lender. The lender then reviews everything that you have signed, making sure that they have wet signatures, that you haven't missed an initial somewhere, and they'll make sure that they then, after they have approved those documents, would then send their money, saying, here's their money from us for them to purchase that home, and then we'll kind of fund the whole file and close. So time really depends on how far or how fast your lender moves. We can't essentially close unless, they send their money. So if you're in there for a little while, it's not that we want to keep you there forever. It's essentially just waiting on the lender to kind of give us the, okay, they're approved, you can go ahead and give them the keys, because of course we will never give away keys without being approved by the lender saying that, you're good, this house is yours, and I have all your funds.
Sure. Now, does the seller always have to sign first, or can it happen in reverse order?
Yeah, so typically we ask the seller to pre-sign. Their documents are probably like a tiny little stack of paper, so if they can get that out of the way, it's better. I wouldn't say that we wouldn't do that. We have had instances where the buyer is free at like 11 o'clock and the seller isn't free until 3 later that day, which is completely fine. But that's why we kind of arrange things to be a little earlier. We ask the seller to be there maybe 2 or 3 days before their closing date for them to sign and get their paperwork out of it. That way when the time comes, the day of closing, they just essentially get their check. So.
Okay, well, what are the top 3 documents a buyer should read carefully before he or she signs them?
Yes. First one I would say is your closing disclosure or your ALTA. Make sure that all of the fees that were disclosed to you in the beginning are there, especially when it comes down to anything that you as a buyer were in charge of paying. So if your lender, your agent kind of disclosed a certain amount to you, that this is how much it will be, make sure that that number is still there. Make sure that it's completely, correct, and that everything that you have paid for is shown on that settlement statement. Things like your deposit, make sure that that was there, that is completely in its totality everything that you paid. Because like I said earlier, we're all humans, right? We want to say that there is no room for mistakes, but since, we're all fickle human beings, like that does occur. So making sure that everything is correct is one thing I would say as a buyer is important. The other thing would be the deed. Make sure that your name is spelled correctly. We have had instances where people, fill out their buyer information sheet and forgot an I or an E, or misspelled their last name because of autocorrect or something. So when it gets printed on the deed, they're like, that's not my name. So just making sure that you're reviewing that and that everything was completed correctly. Also ensuring that your marital status is on there. That is also a really important thing for the state of Florida, is to convey if you are married, if you're single, making sure that your marital status is correct. Just so that it all conveys and your chain of title will always stay consistent and clean. And the last thing I would say would be your mortgage, making sure that the same way your note has your name correctly, has the address correctly, making sure that you understand your payments and everything in there before you go ahead and sign.
Okay. Now, do you ever get it where, let's say, someone is separated and they don't declare that they're still married? Does that come up as an issue in the future?
Yes. There are some things within Florida and what separation means, and if you're still legally married and how that all conveys down when you're selling property. If you are not legally divorced, you are still married, and you would still have to act like if you were married when it comes to selling property. Florida does a really good job at making sure that if it was your homestead and you were on title, that your portion of what you owned cannot just be taken by somebody else. They're really good at making sure that you can't sell a home without the other person knowing, because it would be illegal, because they have legal ownership to the home. So it all comes down. It does get really tricky when someone is separated, even when people are divorced or people are in the process of getting married and they're like, oh, I'm getting married 2 days after I'm closing on my home. I had a specific situation where she wanted her husband to be on title as her husband, as well as the mortgage, and so 3 hours before they were supposed to sign, they went to the courthouse and got married, so they could have the paperwork that they can convey that they were married to each other, which I thought was really great, because you get married and you're celebrating buying a house all on the same day. But yes, there are things that I would say make sure that all of that is in order before you go ahead and state where you are at as far as marital status.
But what if they state, though, oh, well, he or she is not on my title or not on my deed? I'm sure there's still protections in place, right?
Right. Let's say me and my husband are married, or we weren't married when I bought this house, and then we then divorced or whatever. He wouldn't have any legal right to my home because I bought it before I was married and I took title as a single person. But if he lived there with me, then that kind of changes things, because then it's homestead. He also lived there with me, and that can kind of blur the lines a little bit. So it all comes down to when it happened. Who was it with, what in the world went on during that, so that we can kind of make sure that all of that is transferred correctly.
So in a way, you're kind of also a little bit of a background investigator to make sure this person is who they say they are.
Absolutely.
And is the status that they say they are as well.
Right.
Wow. Okay, so if a search finds an unpaid tax lien or a contractor lien, does that mean the house is off limits to purchase?
No. So you are more than happy to purchase it. One of the biggest things, or I feel like the biggest job for a title company, is making sure that those things are paid off. So if the title search comes back and they're like, you have 10 liens and the county is asking for $15,000, it would be our job to make sure that that's clear before you go ahead and finalize the paperwork. So making sure that we're paying off, that the seller has the money to pay it off, that the money's going to come from somewhere for them to close that. So no, I wouldn't say that that's something that should limit a buyer, because they could fall in love with the home. These are all things that can be cleared, and they can all be cleared up. So nothing could be able to potentially stop you from buying it.
But it could limit the seller from actually selling the home, right?
Right, yeah, they might not want to, yeah.
Okay, or make enough profit to pay off
it
those
off,
things.
right. So they're like, you know what, I think I'll just stay with my house and I won't sell it because I'm not going to make any money out of it, 100%.
Okay, but how far in advance before closing is this typically found out?
Yeah, so when we get the contract, and we immediately take it to get underwritten by our title partners. So they're the ones that do the digging to see the title and what's going on and what was recorded. Typically those things come 3 to 5 business days after we get the contract and open the file. So we get it pretty early in the transaction, and so we're able to get it done within the typical 30-day contract, standard contract that everyone does. So luckily we're able to find out early, and then it's just a matter of staying on top of those things, because just like with anything, like when you want to get something done with the county, you might not hear back. So it's just the process of, staying on top and making sure that everybody who has the information is disclosing the information. One of our processors needed a payoff for, it was a tax lien, and they could not get anyone on the phone or email. And she drove all the way to the city, to the county, to talk to someone personally to get it from them, like in person, because she was like, no, I need this, we need to pay it off. the closing's happening in 20 days, like we're not going to leave this up to chance. So I think it really just all goes down to, going above and beyond, but making sure that things are really moving the way they need to.
Okay, and do you guys also inquire with the HOAs associated with the home?
Yes, yeah. Typically we order that right off the bat as well. HOAs typically tell us that their turnaround time is 14 business days. So getting that immediately in when it comes in is probably the most important part. Some HOAs work a little faster, but typically we tell the buyer and the seller, like, wait for this for 14 business days. And once we get all the information, we will disclose it when we get it.
Yeah, because I ran into an example last night where I was doing some research for the HOA bill that's coming to that has been presented to Tallahassee. And one of the comments was that on the day of closing, the HOA dropped a $5,000 fine on the homeowner because they wanted to have them repaint their home, pull up the grass, and do all sorts of repairs to their home. However, the homeowner claimed that they never received notice of this. So this is something that a title company may trigger if the title company is doing their job and say, hey, the HOA came back and said, you need to do all these things. Did you know about it? Because I know a lot of these HOAs, they tend to put violations in a portal. And if you're not logging into that thing every day, or let's say you got a PO box and they're sending the violations to your PO box and you just don't check it as often,
right,
you'd hate to go to closing and not know these things.
Of course, and then getting that kind of money taken out from your proceeds. Like, you had a certain amount in mind of what you'd receive, and then the day of finding out that you owed money that you had no idea you owed would be problematic to anybody.
Sure. So we discussed previously that there were different levels of title insurance. Can you go over what that might mean to somebody?
Yeah. So title insurance isn't, I don't want to say, it's not legally required. If you do not want title insurance, if you don't want an insurance to insure your home, you can 100% say, I don't want it, don't charge me for it, I'm not interested. So it comes down to, obviously, personal preference. I mean, I don't think that I would ever encourage someone not to get title insurance, because just like any good insurance, it protects you from anything that could come up. But the premium and everything, like we were talking a little earlier, would always stay the same. So what you end up paying is what you'll get. But one thing that we do tell buyers, because sometimes they don't know this, is that typically in transactions, the seller is the one who pays for your title insurance. So they take on that cost to give you like a good faith kind of, like saying, like, that I trusted the title company because I chose the title company. I trusted the title company to clear everything. You can see all the documents. Everything is clear. This is my good faith telling you that there's nothing, I'm not hiding anything. So here is your title insurance. So typically the seller will pay for it. Now, does that mean that they might negotiate and say, I'm not interested in paying your title insurance for you, buyer? Of course. But typically the seller pays for it. So it's like, why not? If it's not coming out of your pocket, why would you not just want insurance that is free, right? The only thing that you would pay for is lender's title insurance, but that's something that you deal with as far as your lender and protecting the interest of the money that they put in for you to buy a home. But if you could get title insurance, I definitely would say that's probably the most important thing for you to figure out while you're going through the process.
Now, that title insurance basically tells the homeowner that the title company did their due diligence. However, if they missed something, that they're still covered?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. The title insurance would then say, oh, we made this mistake, we missed this, the title insurance will cover you. Yeah.
Okay, because we heard some nightmare stories about how someone didn't purchase title insurance, and then some lien holder that the title company may have missed or that came forward after the purchase and say, no, the buyer, the new buyer owes us, thousands of dollars that we didn't claim before, or we had a claim but it wasn't recorded properly or whatever. And now this new homeowner might think if they didn't purchase title insurance, they might be held liable. But if they did, they'd go to the title company and say, hey,
I have a claim.
Yeah.
Can you please take care of that? And 100%, they come forward with whatever it is that they are putting against them in the title insurance section of our company, right? Because there are specific people who would deal with that, would then go ahead and go through with the claim and making sure that it's all covered.
Yeah, because if the seller's going to buy it anyway, then why not? But even if you had to purchase it, I think it would be for peace of mind that nobody's going to come out of the woodwork and say, hey, I own this home. They had no right to sell this home, and now you got to get out.
Right.
And, you put 20% down, maybe 30% down, depending on what you paid at the time, plus all those closing costs. You don't want to be out of your home because somebody comes with a claim.
This is your biggest investment. Like, this is probably the the biggest purchase that you'll make in your life. So why not give it the extra protection that it needs? Like, why not take care of something that you have invested time and energy into do? You know, there's some people who will never ever be able to qualify or buy a home. So owning a home and going through that process is such a blessing. Like, it's such an achievement. Like, why wouldn't you want to be covered or protected from anything that could come up?
Yeah, and especially with the median age of a new home buyer is now 40 years old. So, I mean, this is a huge investment. If you get, like you said, to that dream of actually being able to purchase a property, you'd want to protect it with what you can protect. Now, some people say, oh, well, I could purchase this title lock insurance, because we have seen incidents, maybe not necessarily in the state of Florida, but in other states where people can actually try and steal the title. Has that ever happened?
Yeah, a lot of, since these documents like new deeds and stuff get recorded in the county, and the county is public, you know, you can go in and see things that even if they're not for you. A lot of new home buyers have received letters in the mail coming from the county stating, oh, like, we have a copy of your deed. You need to pay $100 for us to send it to you. Like, please send the money to this address and we'll go ahead and forward you the certified copy. You never have to pay for that document. You get it from your title company, but you also get the recorded copy from your title company as well. But you can go to the county online and download that document that you have. So yes, we see a lot of fraud, unfortunately, for new home buyers. So if they're not educated and know, you know, when something is a scam, because if I got a letter from the county telling me that they had a copy of my deed, why would I not believe that? Especially when it looks legitimate. So yes, unfortunately, we do see a lot of, you know, people taking advantage of something.
But if they have title insurance, there's not really a necessity to go with a title lock company. Is that true?
Yeah. I wouldn't go as far as it's like extra. I want to say that'd be like an extra thing, but it's true. When you have title insurance, you wouldn't need to focus on that.
Okay. And one of the questions that may come up with a buyer is, do I have to use the title company the real estate agent recommends?
Right. So as a consumer, you are more than happy, or you have the option of choosing whoever it is that you want. I will say that it depends on who is paying for title insurance. So on our standard like FAR contract, there is a section in there that talks about who is choosing title. So if the seller chooses title, they're the ones paying for title insurance. If the buyer chooses title, they're the ones that's going to pay for title insurance. So it just typically comes down to who is paying for title insurance. But on either end, if you're the listing agent or the buyer's agent, your customer can let you know who it is that you want to use. Like, if you have a friend, if you know a company and you really want to use them, you can of course go ahead and choose. We have seen instances where a listing agent would be like, oh, well, I want to use this title company, but the seller's like, oh, but I know this person and I would actually prefer to go there. And the listing agent will have to say, okay, we'll use the title company that you recommended, because due to RESPA and all those violations and stuff, as a consumer, you are allowed to choose wherever it is that you want to go.
Well, that's good. So you do have freedom of choice.
Right.
So what is one piece of advice you wish every first-time home buyer knew before they set a closing date?
Let's see. The advice that I would give a new home buyer would be just to stay on top of the whole transaction. Nothing slows down the process of closing than somebody who is unreachable. Now, I understand that we all have jobs, right? We're not, especially a typical 9 to 5, you know, we might not be able to get on the phone and stuff like that. But when you get home and you look through your emails and you see anything from the title company and they're requesting any information from you, just make sure that you get onto that. We have gotten to like almost closing and have never heard from the buyer. Like, they made their deposit, just kind of disappeared. But there's information that we of course need, the lender needs, to make sure that we are ensuring that we're keeping up with the timeline. So if that's the only advice that I could give, it's just to stay involved. I mean, this is just as much as your biggest investment, as something that we love to handle. Like, why would you not want to see how the process is going and give all the information to make sure it goes smoothly?
For sure. Now, the other day, Hillsborough Title gave us agents a presentation about how they incorporate technology into the title process. Now, you mentioned an app to where a home buyer can ask this app, it's a chatbot, that when is their closing date, how much do they have to bring to the table? Can you explain this app?
Yeah, of course. So it's not an app, it goes through like a portal. So it's going to be attached to the portal invite that you get at the beginning of the process. And essentially, her name is Alana. She is an AI bot. She sends text messages. So once you get her first initial text message where she introduces herself, you then have the opportunity to text, like if you were texting a friend. And yes, Alana is attached to our system, so she can pull information at whatever time. So we close at 5 o'clock. Let's say you have a question about something. When was your closing scheduled, how much money you need to bring? You can then text Alana and ask her, how much do I need to bring to closing? She pulls the information and she'll say, this is how much you need to bring. You can ask her directly for wiring instructions through the secure portal. She'll pull the wiring instructions for you straight to your phone. So yes, she's super great, and I think it's it's revolutionary that you can talk to someone after hours, especially about something that you may need that, you don't typically get someone after 5.
Right. Now, going back to the fraud aspect, like Jasmine mentioned, that this particular chatbot is secure because a title company will never send you wire transfer instructions via email, correct?
Right.
So we've seen that some reports from other agents in our company that they spoof our agent email and they go to the buyer and say, hey, you need to wire your, let's say, your payment to the title company, and here's the wire instructions. Note that that might be actual fraud. Please contact your agent directly and make sure that whatever is sent to you is legitimate, or contact the title company directly. If you're not sure about an AI bot, which I totally understand, you can always call the title company directly during those business hours to make sure and confirm that those numbers are correct and that money is going in the right hands. We want to make sure that your transaction is as safe and secure and as fraud-free as possible. So do you have anything else that might be of value to a first-time home buyer?
I think that because there's so much paperwork and stuff that goes into buying a home, you get, all of these different things. I feel like the magic of the whole transaction sometimes gets lost because you get a little overwhelmed with all of the things. So I think that's the only thing that I can say. Like, make sure that you keep that positivity, that magic of something really important happening. We love to celebrate people who are purchasing, and we get to see, how the sellers have transferred title to someone new, and now someone gets to make new memories in that home. So the whole process within itself, even though there's so much that goes deep into it, I think that's probably the brightest part about it all, is like seeing somebody do something as big as that. So it's really exciting.
So overall, even though the home buying process may seem complicated and stressful, it doesn't have to be if you hire the right agent and have the right title company to support you in your home buying goals. Until next time, I hope you like this video. Like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one.